All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Jacuzzi Friday Hangout. Very lucky to have Anna Angelic here today. So excited to chat with you. I've been really addicted to her newsletter since I think probably March, probably when everything was happening and you were writing really interesting thoughts on COVID and what that meant for brands. That's when I started reading her Substack newsletter, which is the sociology of business, which is something that I can link up for everybody. Highly recommend it. I think the Kanye post, maybe the Galaxy of Kanye, was really interesting to me as well. We're going to dig into some of that. We're also going to talk about her upcoming book, which is the business of aspiration. So we're going to talk about brands as sort of aspirational companies and what that means. So Anna, why don't we kind of just kick off with, I'd love to hear a bit about your background and how you got into branding, because your background's a little bit non-traditional for that, but I think you apply it in a really interesting way. And then maybe you can talk some and just give people the kind of base idea of what is the aspiration economy.
First of all, thanks for having me. I really loved your idea when you were like, hey, why don't you talk about your book here? And I'm like, great. I didn't even know about you guys. And I would love to be part of that Slack, but you never invited me. So I don't know if
Okay,
it's
after this first
one of those
thing, you're
things
getting
that
an
I have
invite.
to kind of like prove my worth first. Or
Oh, no, you don't have to do that.
yeah, no, I would love that because I'm part of like some others, and there's always like good stuff to be discovered. That's how I mostly discover like cool things. And your community sounds amazing. So congrats on organizing and putting everyone together in such a community. So that is sort of the how this relationship started. And on my background, I'm Serbian. I'm from Belgrade. I moved to New York 20 years ago to do my master's and PhD. So if you're referring to that non-traditional background, that's more of my academic background. But at the same time, I started working around 2005 and 6 in digital agencies in New York at Razorfish and AKQA as a strategist. So that is that sort of combination of sociology and business. That's why hence the name of the newsletter, Sociology of Business, how to apply everything that I like learned about innovation and technology and sociology of technology and digital branding and basically the transformation of media into the real life setting. So that is the motivation behind my career. And then in the past maybe 5 to 7 years, I decided to focus on fashion, luxury, and lifestyle brands because they're the ones who are moving the culture and who are aspirational, who are setting the tone of what is aspirational. And at the same time, they themselves were going through unbelievably rapid transformation in terms of what retail markets look like. How are people buying? What they're willing to pay for? What do you think? What do they think it's valuable? What kind of commerce is there? From e-commerce to mobile commerce to aggregators to social commerce to omni-channel. So that was a very rich area. So I sort of pivoted in that direction and most recently worked as a chief marketing officer in a number of companies.
Yeah, and so you talk about brands as sort of these educators of culture and sort of curating that. Can you talk more about the role for brands today? You kind of went through a sequence of historical changes. Kind of where are we now? You mentioned kind of omni-channel and mobile. Where does that leave us now? And can you talk some about how brands educate and kind of create culture?
Right. Well, brands were always in the business of creating aspiration because it was always from the get-go, from 100 years ago, when the first like brands really emerged as signals of quality. You can buy anything locally, but then do you want to buy from, I don't know, the Morrises or from Joneses, or that depends how they branded themselves and what they sort of offered. So, but they always promised from every first like radio jingles is like, if you buy this product, you're going to be prettier, you're going to feel richer, you're going to look more accomplished, people are going to think that you're more successful than you are, and so on. So they always traded in aspiration brands. They always, if they never said like, oh, buy this and like go home and watch TV. It was like, buy this and then you're going to meet this girl and like go bar and meet this girl and like have a great family and buy more stuff. That was sort of that consumer machine that was powering all of that. And then because of my own background as like sort of growing brands and businesses, I was like, well, that really rewards bad behaviors, because accumulation of things, it's and like that force of us travel all the time, accumulate experiences, accumulate airline miles, social media likes, that's bad behavior. It's not good for the planet, it's not good for us. Like, it's killing us, it's killing the planet. So since the brands have such an important role in creating imagery and putting forward narratives that are aspirational, my idea behind the book and my own work is like how to flip that script and start putting forward more positive values in terms of be environmentally conscious, XYZ, recycle, buy from brands that are creating things locally, that are supporting local communities, and so on. So it's not just that, but it was more, that was a high level, that was the big picture. And more specifically was, how do you build brands today that do not rely on this wasteful advertising and like bombarding with images and super expensive Super Bowl ads, but are instead focusing on more sustainable growth, like through communities, through content, through curation, through collaborations, through creating fans before you create customers, and how to like really build their brand identities rather than copying what their competitors are doing in terms of marketing. So there is really a business shift that's happening from this bigger sociological challenge.
I see. So there's a sociological challenge around aspiration being, I don't want to say harmful, but maybe
It is
ending, yeah,
hard.
harmful to the planet. And you're saying your book is essentially about there's a shift sociologically that's happening, but that's also to the advantage of businesses and brands who embrace that sooner, and embrace a different model of growing.
Yes, absolutely. So that is this is a business book. This is a book for small business owners, for big business owners, for marketers, for advertising agencies, for anyone who is building their own company, and anyone who is working with people who are building their own companies. So in that sense, it's very strategy oriented, very business and brand strategy. So this means like, okay, so this is happening, this is what you should do in order to capitalize on it, or in order to capture this specific value, or how do you create a value architecture around not maybe loyalty, but membership? How do you create value architecture not around competing on price, but around maybe creating subscriptions or creating intangibles like community or access that people do want to be part of? How to make a brand part of your balance sheet, and why is that important? And things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to dive in and dig a little deeper into maybe one or two of those. Maybe since this is sort of a membership community or micro community, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, it seems like there's a little bit of this contrast between people who want community because they are trying to pursue this business goal, and they're kind of doing it to create memberships just for buyers instead of truly creating a community around their brand. I'd love to dig into maybe memberships and community as a positive strategy for brands moving forward.
Right. So the first thing is always like, I think that now this particular time and this particular year is really forcing both established and new brands to really think about what they stand for and what their values are, and that to create that sort of DNA that is more about around equality and diversity and social responsibility overall. So I think that's a default right now, that there is, it's not a choice anymore. And once you have that sort of DNA, how do you build community around that DNA? And a lot of people and brands are talking about the community, but community is not something that you can be like, hey guys, follow me. It's not about following. It's about looking what communities already exist there, what are the shared interests and shared needs, and how you can add value to that. Because when you're seeing how communities are emerging on Instagram around special interests, for example, and how those people are even charging access to that community, it is because, say, you're really into plants or into coffee or into maybe artisanal bourbon or something, something, or into hard seltzer. So you're going to go and want to learn more about that if you want to evolve your taste. There are, of course, those who are going to stay on this mass level and just buy whatever is available. But there are more and more of those who are actually actively curating their lifestyle, that went from curating what you buy towards curating the furniture you're buying, and towards your own interests. So in that sense, there are a lot of communities, taste communities, micro communities of interest out there. The question is, how can you participate in those communities and add value? Are you taking them on this educational journey or the taste refinement journey? Or like, how do you interact with them? Because you probably started your own community out of your interest and recognized need that startup founders and small business owners do need advice in terms of how to set up an organization, where to find resources, who to hire, what business model do they create. And in that sense, that conversation was naturally happening. If you are a brand, there is a number of ways that you can do that. Content is one of those ways. And right now, there are no more niche magazines. There are more niche magazines than ever. There are no more mainstream magazines than niche magazines, and they're doing better because they're focused on those very specialized things. And those small brands who know exactly who their customer is, they're doing better than those large ones who serve a lot of customer groups. The downside of that is that it's micro, and that's also the upside, because it introduces a completely new way of growth, which is through collection of niches rather than going and reaching scale, which is already a business strategy.
Yeah, I love that line, building a collection of niches. I think that's really interesting as a way of expanding. I think one thing that people think about and you have really interesting take on this, is like the difference between insiders and kind of going mass. And I remember reading something in one of your newsletters that was, you want to create a group of insiders who can talk, who can communicate about these shared interests. But it also seems like having other people outside of that group be aware that that group exists is actually important for the sort of myth making of that group. So I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about, this idea of insiders and sort of, but also informing the outside group.
Absolutely. And that one is taken from luxury marketing. That's what luxury marketing does. They don't say, when they advertise Rolls Royce or Patek Philippe, or like, you don't advertise for everyone to buy that. You advertise for everyone to know that those who have what it means for those who have it, so that those who have it know that everyone else knows that they have this special status. So that's why, in that sense, I'm saying build awareness before acquisition, and build fans before customers, because there is many more fans of the brand than there are actually customers. And that's the reversal of this traditional marketing logic, where all the marketing dollars, with like when you jump on a customer acquisition treadmill, they need to be accounted for. That's wrong. You need to waste. That's not like waste. So everyone knows about you, and they know exactly what it means to say, run in Tracksmith shorts. Whoever runs in Tracksmith shorts, they don't have a waist that's bigger than 32 inches. And that's on purpose. And okay, you can ask, well, how does that make sense in this culture of inclusivity? But for Tracksmith, that's a brand building tool, because they're like, no, we are for serious runners, those who have time and money to run 3+ hours a day. But that's very clear identity. And those who see Tracksmith ads know what that means to be a Tracksmith runner.
Yeah, having waste, I think, is something new. I know that's part of this kind of idea of the end of efficiency, and also the little bit of a tension between maybe VC and the way that it's traditionally pursued funding, and I guess maybe the more like bootstrap kind of niche community route. So maybe let's start with talking about funding models a little bit, because I think that waste and the end of efficiency in that funding, I think, is maybe still not here yet, where people are comfortable investing in companies and seeing that. And then maybe we could talk about your thesis for the end of efficiency more broadly.
Right. So I think you're referring with in terms of like VC model is what I wrote about the difference between assets and brands. And few weeks after that, I saw this photo of a Coca-Cola. I think I have it. Let me just show you because I think I have it. Yeah. And that really, in one image, sort of summarizes what I was talking about. What is the difference between managing something as an asset, and what are the strategies of increasing value of an asset quickly, which means like get as many customers you can, the shortest time period as you possibly can, versus growing and nurturing brand, which has an intangible part, which is its equity. And equity is not something that you can build very quickly. And there are two different models. One is economies of scale, which is with assets, and the other is network effect, which is the brand. The more people know about it, they have positive perception, the more valuable the company is. So I really like, let me show you this. So even if you don't read it, like this lower part is what is the value of Coca-Cola as a product. People enjoy drinking it because of its taste, consistency, and so on. This white part of it is the brand. That's why you're paying as much as you are paying. And that's why Coca-Cola has those associations. So it says without the brand, Coke glass would be half empty. And that why is that important is that market capitalization is much harder and brand value is much higher, not harder, sorry. It's much higher than it would be without the brand. And that is the key thing when it comes to VCs, to understand that the company is more valuable if it has a brand. It's more valuable, it has higher market capitalization, and it has greater longevity. And it's going to spend less money on creating competitive differentiation if it already has. Otherwise, it's just going to compete on price or distribution and then forget about it.
I see. So let's put a pin on the bigger topic of efficiency, because I think this is a good segue into the different models that you've sort of created for how brands can expand. Because I think the next piece of this conversation is, okay, you found your niche, you've done the hard work of growing this valuable brand. How do you actually hit large enough scale so that VC still might be viable funding? And what I'm referring to is sort of the galaxy versus the wheel versus the diamond, and those models, because I guess what I hear when I read those is that's the way you actually start with a really quality brand, but still scale, like Goop, for example. So maybe if you could give us one or two examples of each type of community. We could just start with one. Let's start with maybe the galaxy, and then we could go to the wheel and discuss those models and how they kind of expand from that core brand asset.
Right. Well, the whole idea of having those models is to help companies, startups, decide early how they want to grow. So they don't need to grow through just unstrategically adding, like just rushing after the market share. These models are meant to strategically help them reach that market share, but also keep it and also have sustainable and long-term differentiation, if you will, or market position. And the examples that I use can be absolutely replicated. That's why I go in depth to explain how they work. They're reverse engineers for the companies that already exist, but I can absolutely see that applied to new companies. So the Galaxy model is the one that was pioneered by Ralph Lauren when he launched his brand back in the 60s. And that based on a personality who is at the center of the galaxy, and whoever is at the center of the galaxy, it's like a black hole. He like holds together every single other brand execution that is happening. And I say brand execution because it can be a product, or it can be a service, it can be a location, store, merchandising, whatever is going on, collaborations, whatever brand actions are happening are actually the ones that are held together by personality of the founder. So having a strong founder personality is really good idea at the beginning, because that means there is a very clear vision, single-minded vision, which is unique because it belongs to a specific person. It's not a corporate vision that is done by consultants. It has a very clear aesthetic. It has a very clear point of view. It has a very clear sort of set of values behind it. And that, as I said, personality engine. Over time, as we've seen with Ralph Lauren, that can become a liability, having the founder at the center. So unless the founder manages to replace himself with an idea, that can be a challenge. But even an idea can be at the center of the galaxy and organize everything that's happening around it. What is important to understand with the galaxy model is that the brand plays with an invented story. So in the same way that Ralph Lauren invented American Dream for himself, he was a kid from the Bronx, invented the dream for also his audience by creating an image of East Coast American aristocracy, like Great Gatsby situation or golden age of Hollywood. So that entire iconography and myth that he created around his brand is not real. I mean, the brand was founded in the late 60s by a kid from a Bronx. So it doesn't matter that it's not real because it's still authentic enough so a person who walks in a Madison Avenue store feels like they're walking in like East Coast aristocratic home. So here, the core of the branding, the pillars of branding are not the product or quality of craftsmanship. They're not that. That's like Hermes. That's different model. It's more merchandising. How do you select and arrange project visual merchandising? It is a brand image, putting forward that consistent imagery that is more in communication, and also what is the vibe and what is the experience of retail locations. So all of a sudden, like stores become those key marketing and branding component. So that is how Galaxy models usually work. Another example that I used was Kanye West before his meltdown. I mean, the latest meltdown, let's put it that way. And how he actually is recreating, again, playing off American Dream of the Wild West by creating a location, a provenance on his ranch in Wyoming. And how is, in addition to that, is like a site of pilgrimage. He was like, Holy Spirit led me to this place. So there is like a strong mythological component, strong component of setting the stage for the brand universe to happen. And then there is the gospel choir and there's Sunday service and there is specific aesthetic and everything is recyclable, and he's going to create industry when there's never any apparel industry in Wyoming and so on. So the whole thing serves to create that narrative and the myth around his brand, which is at the end of the day like very, very, very smart business strategy. Because once it's established in our heads, in our perception that it stands for spirituality, community, the future, the sustainability, that brand can go into any category it wants. Right now it's going into beauty, into wellness, into apparel, into home goods, but it can go to automotive, it can go to resorts, like whatever you like, but as long as it has what now it's being established in real time, that's very strong brand ethos and identity.
Yeah, it's amazing. Maybe it was you who wrote this, but I know it's sort of like a Disneyland idea where you're just creating such a big idea of fun and enjoyment, whereas his is a little more community, sustainability, spirituality. It's so big that it can just encapsulate, and that's why you see obviously Disney's so massive. So
Disneyland, Hollywood, like
mhm.
Americans are really, I'm American now, but like they're very good in creating dreams. So
Yeah,
it's
and it
not
is so interesting the setting.
those invented heritage brands are American brands. You don't have that in Europe.
Right. And we
Or
sort of need to because we don't have the history and things haven't been around as long. So you don't have that heritage.
Right.
So I want to transition to questions here pretty soon, but I thought it'd be fun to dig into like what brands you're excited about right now. So
Mm.
I don't know. There's funny things that while you're speaking, I pictured WeWork a little bit as this like VC, but tries to be the brand, but it didn't really work. And
That's
anyways,
what I mean. There are a lot of
yeah.
crazy founders, you know, and they're
Mhm.
like at the beginning they seem like this like amazing visionary figures, and then they're like really turn out to be anti icons, you know. They're like either devolve into, I mean, they just pivot
Yeah.
mentally pivot.
Right. So yeah, what brands like really catch your eye? And I'd be curious to hear why, you know, and so maybe there's just a few that you really love, and what is it about them that you think they're doing right or you just find to be really awesome?
Well, last week I wrote about IKEA, and that made me do like dig a little deeper and research them more. And I'm really fascinated about how they manage to combine this very strong brand culture, the very clear set of brand values, that like brand identity that's rooted in provenance in Sweden, but also in Swedish values of humility, like egalitarianism, the sort of humble humility, if you will, that, and then quirkiness as well, and open-mindedness, and how they manage to use that and not dilute that, and then still grow in a very mature market. I mean, IKEA like saturates the entire world. Their success in China, where very few Western companies succeed. So the question is, how do they manage really to have that strong identity and also grow globally, and also keep being relevant, keep being fresh and innovative, and being able to absorb these like different perceptions that go from like being cheap furniture for a first apartment to being really innovative, and also to being someone who, oh, you need to have a collective. If you're a collector, you're going to chase that IKEA furniture for 1950s because there's like modernity design. So it's sort of like managed to appeal to many, many different audiences and many different need states and sort of motivations, from curators and collectors to students. So that is something I was very excited. I mean, kind of like excited to dig deeper in and learn from, and how their collaborations are not just like all flashy collaborations with like fashion names, but they actually go towards social good, and they go also towards what are the modern home rituals, how to design for living in small spaces. So they collaborate with NASA to figure that out, because those small spaceships are small spaces. So there is all this like big presence, being present in the world and kind of flexing the zeitgeist muscle, and be very open without losing sight of who you are.
Yeah, they're amazing. Now that you start listing that out, it's incredible what they've done. They've also become a destination, you know, where you go, you get food there, and there is kind of a ritual, and yeah, that's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and then now they're also inventing the food. So you have vegan meatballs, you know, like, and so on. So they're very present in the world. And that is again, going back to Swedish character, that lack of complacency. They're not complacent. I mean, what do they want? They're like, everyone is buying IKEA. Everyone knows about IKEA, but yet they still keep going and evolving as a brand.
Yeah. So let's jump in. If anybody wants to hop in and ask a question, you know, feel free. And otherwise, I'll keep posing some other things.
I have one. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for joining. Really interesting stuff. I'm Jack. I have a question around, are you familiar with Dunbar's number? Like the maximum number that one person can be in. So the question is revolving around, like, if every brand is building communities, does there need to be an acknowledgement from those brands that there's some saturation point of how many communities a customer is a part of or can be a part of, and rather that brand should be thinking about how they fit into the entire constellation of communities that user is a part of? Like, I find myself overwhelmed by every brand. You know, I buy some socks and they're like, join our community. I'm like, there's a limit to what people can do and how many communities they can be in. So if all brands are now communities, just interested to hear how you think about that.
Right, but you're thinking that from a point of view of brands, and think about it from your own point of view. You're not interested in joining every single community. You don't want to be part of a socks community. You want to be part maybe of a movie community or book community or some other cultural dimension of that. So I think that is natural selection of our attention span and more above all our interest. And there is also a selection based on social influences or what communities our friends are part of. So we are going to go when we already know someone, or if we want to know someone because we are really passionate about specific topic or interest, or we want that to be part of our identity. So I think that we naturally filter what where we want to belong, and like, and also we don't want to spend like all our time full time. So sometimes we're just excursionists in certain communities, like log in once a week to see what's new, or to check in, or like on Clubhouse. Like I used to like Clubhouse a couple of like a month ago when I joined, and now I'm like, oh, I need to remove this app because they will send you notifications, and I'm like, I don't care about any of this stuff. So, and so in that sense, it's kind of again natural filtering. The other thing is there are not enough people I know and like there. There are people I know and like and want to talk to, and those conversations are the best. But there are too many people I don't know, because the Venn diagram between my social graph or my social graphs on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, real life versus Clubhouse is very small. So that is the challenge. If everyone was there and I knew them and it was a party, of course I would have, be more passionate about it. So I think that that when you talk about community, you can just think about it as another marketing tool. It's really social influence.
Yeah.
And who do you want to belong? Who are you influenced by? And how you want to shape your identity.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess I'm part of the question statement is like almost you don't see brands acknowledge that frequently. Like they just assume everyone's going to be this super high value user that's going to be back every single day, and so I'm surprised that there's not more of a acknowledgement that certain members will only come every month or every quarter or whatever, and others will be, tiers of engagement type thing, or how they fit into the other.
I mean, that's why I wrote a membership. When I wrote about membership program, I said there is no one membership program.
Right.
There are like as many membership programs almost as your customers. I mean, that's extreme, but it needs to be personalized. What are the benefits for a person who comes once a month? And they still need to feel very cool and valuable and recognized and so on.
Right.
But they won't feel that way if you have only one membership program and they have 3 points and you need 300 points.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll hop on Jack's question, actually. I'm interested in this idea of community and how explicit or real does community need to be? Like, do brands need to facilitate actual relationships between customers, or can related? So I choose a brand, perhaps expression, or choosing something that's meaningful to me, for instance, a social method, community be more philosophical.
Communities to a certain extent because we belong to them because of how we want to perceive ourselves, but also how we want to be perceived. And they're imagined in a sense, if we stay true to what Benedict Anderson, who introduced the concept, said, it's like we're not going to know each member of the community, but we're going to know that we share the same values or interests or tastes. So I think in that sense, all communities are imagined. That's one. And second of all, I don't think that brand should facilitate anything aside of being a member of that community or creating the space and time and context, above all the platform, and add value through like either taste refinement, putting forward a specific taste regime, or educating the customer, so they would naturally gravitate towards towards whatever the brand is putting out in terms of either products or content, or it can invest in attracting people of influence, persons of influence, or specific people that already have big communities. So in that sense, that is how you want to create a structure and framework. But beyond that, community needs to be allowed to thrive. Otherwise, what's the difference between that and like advertising?
I think that's a mistake or a trap that a lot of brands are falling into, is they hear this word community and then suddenly they're actually trying to create a social network around socks without, so I think that's a really important note.
Right. I mean, the call to action cannot be around like join our community or like, sign up and get 10% off. That's transactional. That's fine, but that's transactional. That's not a community building. Call to action is something that's way more subtle, and that's a value that you put forward in the world, value and values that you put forward in the world, and then you see who you attract. And community needs to be actively managed, make no mistake, but the commercial aspect of the community has to be secondary. Otherwise people are going to still like it, but they're going to take it very transactional. So they're going to share their spam email like to get 10% off and never come back again. So that's not that. There's the community for you. That's very imagined community. You're imagining that you have real email addresses.
So I have a question about commerce a little bit and where that's heading. One thing that's seems to have emerged a little bit in, let's say, like the sneaker world or whatever, is obviously the resale market. And really, I guess the communities themselves almost become these like commerce hubs. And so I guess I'm curious about some of where you see things going, either around social commerce or around what I think hasn't really been explored yet, which is like community commerce and sort of like almost like community economies. It's just been kind of top of mind for me. And I'd be curious where you think some of that's going.
Right. I think that is still social commerce. It's just the problem that social commerce has been defined very narrowly, as if like, oh, I can buy stuff on social networks. It's not about that. It's really understanding how, what sort of exchange happens when it's not just transactional, but then when it comes from knowing someone or identifying with someone's style or wanting to belong to a specific group of people, and what role products, objects, clothes, furniture plays in that process of connecting with other people. So I think anything that sort of combines community, content, and commerce is actually social commerce, and that is very visible in those resale marketplaces, like for example Depop or Poshmark. Because there you don't sell things, you're selling basically your own style, you're selling your own image, and there is so much individuality in all those sellers versus eBay. It's not a listing of products. People on Depop, they're like, oh, this is that, this is like their style, and we see more of that with the Instagram celebrity stylists who are selling their closets. No, they are connecting different products into looks, and you're buying into that look. So it really becomes a taste market rather than just resale market or just straight social commerce. The thing with social commerce is that the transactional aspect, that is like, I want this product and you sell it for certain price, takes secondary role to I like you, I have the same taste of you, I want to belong to whatever idea you're presenting, or we have shared interests, which is like maybe punk in New York in the 80s. So I think a lot of that social capital and cultural capital is what you're actually buying, because clothes themselves, they're from, they're 10 years old, they're 2 years old, they're not the point. They cost $5 or $10 or whatever. It's not the point. The point of people actually being there is to feel they're part of specific taste communities and style currents, if you will.
Yeah, they're trading status and yeah, style currency. I think that's a great term. Yeah, who else? Anybody have any other? Go ahead.
I said they're also evolving their own taste because this generation, they literally grew up on the entire televised culture. Like they have access to any style that came before, say, 2010 or something. Like, and they pick and choose whatever from that giant chest of inspiration or previous styles. They are the ones who are actually choosing themselves. They're not following trends. They're of course following trends, but more of form of entertainment and self-expression is to create your own style more than before.
Right. Yeah. Anybody else have a question for Anna?
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
I'm going back to the question on brands, but in a little bit of a different context. I really appreciated your piece on GMO brands, and I'm just in the context of so many GMO brands and maybe the impact that VC has had on on one's ability to create true true cultural relevance and to have the time to build an impact. I'm looking to that. Like, who do you see today that you think is really starting to establish, planting the seeds, early seeds for having long-term cultural relevance and being brands that run counter to that GMO model? Like maybe not someone as established as IKEA, but the really early stages that you think, the signs are there.
Work Pottery is doing a great job, and I'll tell you why. They are vertically integrated. So they're all in one compound where they're creating the clay they're making their homeware from, and the artisans, the craftsmen are there, and they have like storage facilities there. Everything is vertically integrated and owned. So they don't really Chinese partners or these partners thing. The second thing, they're really operating according to the holistic model. And the reason I know this is because I interviewed them for my Business of Aspiration video series in the middle, maybe it was April or something like that. So in the middle of pandemics. And I was blown away by how well prepared they were, not because they foresaw this as a crisis, but because the way they operate is already very holistic, where there are no specialists. Every person helps this other person do their job better. They treat their employees as a family, as one flat group where everyone is hands on a deck, and that is what actually helped them pivot very quickly from having partners that sell in physical stores to doubling down on selling online and finding online partners. And also because they didn't have any physical stores, they had partners, distribution partners that sold their stuff. And also the other thing is because they were unbelievably careful in how they nurture their own community, if you will, or fans. So they are very close to their fans. They investing a lot of time to understand who their audience is and how many different audiences they have and what those different audiences buy. So there is really a lot of data behind that, but also a lot of empathy. And thanks to that empathy with the customer, with their group of people, they have like something like 500,000 Instagram followers, which is amazing for someone who has that sort of market share, who just started 2 years ago or something. Which tells you that there is this true two-way relationship that is less about the pottery and the products they create. They create beautiful things, but it's more about the values that are and the worldview that people identify with and that they respond well to. And similar as with the Rothists, when you look, have similar lifestyle. They have kids, they have jobs, they have like a lot of similar things going on, and all of a sudden this like shoe became so much more than a shoe. Like forget about the shoe, it's now about this very specific relationship with the world that people who buy it have and that they have with each other.
Thanks. Yeah, East Fork is amazing. Connie and Alex are pretty incredible in what they're building. Yeah.
So think it's that there as people are very, their brand is a reflection of who they are as a people, and so that is very hard to really either speed dial on it or fake. Oh, wait, shoe company Rotis.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I know Matt well. I had one other question, which was, do you think we expect too much from brands today on representing certain political viewpoints, social viewpoints? That's obviously evolved. I mean, I used to work at Blue Apron, and we had a lot of debates and discussions about which social and mind and support, if they weren't related to food industry, if they were related to food. It's like, how do you think about brands as, let's just talk about like political impact vehicles? Like, do you think that needs to be kind of like founder led? Do you think it needs to be like related to the specific industry they're in? Like, how do you...
Well, I don't think that we expect too much of our brands, and this is not to say that brands need to be political entities and that they don't need to tell us who they support in terms of political candidates. But what brands do need to do, and that's what goes back to our conversation from the beginning, is they have a responsibility as commercial entities not to just be commercial entities, because we are at the point where that sort of aspiration that the brands have been putting forward, that commercial logic has been putting forward, that creation of just economic value, growth, balance sheet is growing, market share is going, is really has led to a situation of climate crisis and of our own crazy attention spans and crazy lifestyles, that where we are under pressure, that productivity is the only way how you feel self-worth and how you present yourself to the world. And I think the point when it becomes really destructive, then you ask, oh, can these purely commercial entities become also cultural entities or social entities, environmental entities? That doesn't mean that they're going to stop making money. The thing is, what is the social responsibility? And that is the only thing, that social responsibility is something that now we are actually forced as a planet and as a human society to really embrace. Because if we don't, there won't be us in 50 years or 100 years or 150. It's a survival thing.
Yeah.
I think we got oh, go ahead, Jack. I was gonna say, I think we got time for maybe about one more question. I know Brandon had something here, so I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, thanks for making time. It's great to see you here. To your earlier point around a brand like Ralph Lauren, the in-store experience for them is a critical part of, introducing the universe of the brand to the end consumer. When I think about, a brand like Saturdays NYC and both the beautiful stores they have in New York, but also in Japan, what do you see as the impacts of the fact that brands aren't able to introduce that universe to their consumers right now? Presumably they're looking at digital alternatives, and I think brands like Recess have done an amazing job of curating this world through just a web portal. I'm curious, are there any brands that you've seen go about this pivot exceptionally well, but over the next 6 to 18 months without any end in sight? What's the lasting impact going to be on a lot of these brands?
I think that having that sort of universe in a physical realm is the outcome of a specific time and place and context, but it is not excuse not to have a brand universe on other surfaces, other media surfaces, if you'd like. You can create the same similarly curated brand universe on Instagram like Jacuzzi does, or you can create on your own website. And there are also ways to connect with your customers and deliver that storytelling and universe something like customer service or white glove service, and then packaging and the ritual of opening the packaging, or having a magazine or a coffee table book or whatever. There are other physical manifestations that can be shared. There are also virtual manifestations or digital manifestations that can still create that environment and entertainment and sort of the vibe that you want to come across. So I don't think that imagination should be limited to physical stores.
I love that, especially the zines and the coffee table books.
And also like partnership with certain arts and having virtual exhibitions and having like, there is so many things that you can provide in terms of content or access or experts at the end of the day, or movies, or there are a lot of things that can deliver that sort of identity that you want to put forward.
Anna, thank you so much for your time. I know I mentioned some things in the beginning about where people can find you. You've got a book coming out. So if you just want to share that here, I'll link. Yeah, I was gonna say you can hold up, but I'll link all that. This is also gonna be posted
I
on
don't
YouTube.
have it. You can only pre-order.
Right. Okay, yeah. So
you can share the website, Amazon
okay,
link,
perfect.
newsletter link, whatever you want.
Yeah, and you can watch out in your email. I'll send you an invite to the jacuzzi as well. So see you in there too.
Are we going to can I share this video? Are you
Of
going
course. Yeah. I'm gonna download it and we'll put it on our YouTube. And if you want to put on yours, I know she's been doing a video series with interviews with really interesting people as well. Highly recommend you check that out. Plus the newsletter, which I always look forward to. So
and the book.
And the book, which is in for pre-order. So all right.
Thank you so much,
Thanks everybody for hanging out. And we'll see you in the tub, and Anna, we'll get you in there soon.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks guys for taking questions. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thanks,
all right.
Anna.
Yeah, see you later. Bye.